Hello and welcome to Builders. I'm your host Lee Haynes, and today we're exploring how data engineering, marketing, and AI experimentation come together inside a truly global health tech company. My guest is Jonas Dieckmann, Global Manager of Data Intelligence and Team Lead of Data Engineering at Philips. Jonas leads data engineering for global marketing insights and also helps run an internal AI squad that identifies use cases and runs short, pragmatic AI experiments. Philips sits at the intersection of consumer health and enterprise healthcare, spanning personal health, diagnosis and treatment, and connected care, which makes data both high volume and high stakes. So today we'll talk about Jonas's career path, what makes a great data engineer in 2025, and how cross-functional teams accelerate AI adoption, and how Philips' data platform evolved from centralization to decentralization and now towards a governed, domain-driven model. Jonas, a warm welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
All good, thanks. All good. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. Let's start with your path. How did your career evolve towards data engineering, analytics, and eventually leading global teams at Philips?
Yeah, I've actually always been in analytics in my career. I started with more local roles in the beginning in the DACH market, where I'm based out of in Hamburg, turned into more regional responsibility, and now ended up in a global function. But I think what has always shaped me is that, from day one, I was really getting hands-on experience in small and agile teams, connecting data to business need and business impact. And I had different positions, like being a data analyst, being a data engineer, moved into more manager roles afterwards. And that's where I am today. And I think it's important to also mention that I went from within Philips, from one industry, which is our consumer health products like toothbrushes, shavers, you might know that from your home, towards the healthcare domain, which almost feels like switching companies entirely because it's so separate and so different.
Yeah, it's really kind of evolved as a company, hasn't it? Since it's kind of early focus areas, at least. But were there any standout roles or early experiences that have kind of helped shape how you think about data platforms and quality and kind of organizations?
Yeah, it is quite interesting, and in a way, I would say I was lucky because when I started, we didn't have something like a data platform or like big cloud systems. Big governance. We really had the typical situation many companies might be in, that we had messy silo data sitting everywhere, lack of standardization, no clean data processes. And my first role was really take that situation and make something out of it. Try to bring structure, try to build meaningful data products like BI dashboards, forecasting models later. And I think being confronted with the way it should not be in the very beginning helps you think and appreciate also how, let's say, the tools and the infrastructure we have today, how this can really make an impact. And I really loved being in a local role and get an exposure to what really matters for people in the local organization, which helps me now in my global role to have a scalable mindset, but always think back to a problem-solving mindset as well, trying to identifying pain points and solving these with the stakeholders and for the stakeholders. And I think that really shaped me.
And your work now is really at the kind of intersection of data and global marketing, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, we do sit in what we call a global marketing COE center of excellence, and like many other big companies, we do not have one big central analytics team that runs all the programs and data products across functions and businesses, but we really have business-specific analytics teams and also function-specific analytics teams. For example, in supply chain, in finance, but also in the commercial organization where I'm sitting in. And indeed, the focus is a lot on marketing and commercial use cases, I would say, in the end.
And is there anything that makes this kind of space, the intersection of data and global marketing, uniquely hard in a kind of in a health tech context. I mean, these kind of healthcare adjacent industries, right? In
Yeah.
these, data isn't just about performance. It's as much about trust and compliance, and avoiding harm, which
It
raises
is.
the bar for governance and
Yeah.
all the rest of it. So, is there anything that's kind of uniquely hard in a health tech context?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. If I compare this back to my earlier days in the consumer industry, where you have a lot of data and marketing is quite obvious. You see commercials out there on social media. You go to the typical, let's say, stores where you buy online and offline, and it's tangible. It's really clear where you should be as a marketing function and how to reach your consumers. But in healthcare, we don't talk about consumers, but we have two types of clients, and one is the patient in the end in the hospital that will be treated with one of our products. But the actual customer of our solutions, of course, are the, let's say, medical institutions themselves, like hospitals or small radiology practices, for example. So you interact with very mature humans in a very specific domain that is highly regulated. And that makes it, I would say, especially hard from a marketing perspective, because the things you can do are much more limited, and the impact of what you do is also much harder to measure. If you think about the sales cycles, for example, in the consumer world, for example, in a Black Friday week or something, right? You put some advertisement on the shelf or like on the web store. People see it, they click on it, they buy it. Next day they have the product. It's revenue. So you can really, in a tangible way, connect your marketing activities towards commercial output. In healthcare, the sales cycles are sometimes easily 2 to 3 years until products get or the order is signed and product gets installed in the hospital. So linking then this purchase or this installment back to a certain activity is nearly impossible. And also there is not 1 or 2 or 3 marketing triggers throughout the customer journey, but the whole way we approach customers as a commercial organization is just so scattered, which makes it really hard to calculate, for example, the typical ROI that every leader might want to see on where they invest into marketing.
Yeah. These are really, really interesting points that we're actually going to get back to shortly. But before we talk more about kind of platform and architecture and stuff like this, I want to talk a little bit about this AI squad and the kind of cross-functional collaboration, because you help run this AI squad, right, within global marketing.
Yeah, exactly. I think when the topic around ChatGPT, large language models came up a bit ago, of course, everybody started to use it, but it was not really clear how we as an organization will leverage it or want to leverage it. So we let it run, and everybody tried to work on personal productivity on their own a bit. But we faced a moment where we said we need to think strategically what this new capability will bring to us as an organization, and especially in our marketing organization, and how do we want to bring a structure around that. And we do not really believe that it is the right moment to build a big, let's say, AI org where you have specific developers, engineers, product owners just for AI products, because it impacts all the projects and processes we do already, and it impacts every individual in the organization. So it is really hard to say this team is doing AI and this team is not doing AI. So that is why we came up with this idea of building something like a virtual squad, which is, let's say, an additional team that consists out of many analysts, data engineers, data scientists, product owners, business people that come together next to their, let's say, regular job and try to tackle AI use cases and think about that. So it was really the idea of building something that works horizontally across teams, rather than building a new vertical silo that is focused on a specific discipline, because that might have worked with data science a bit better in the past, but we believe this does not work anymore with AI as we see it today.
Yeah. And working across different teams across the organization, you're often kind of acting then as a translator between tech and non-tech teams, right? How does that, or what does that look like day to day in practice?
Yeah, I think most of my time goes into coaching and guiding people in different teams. We need to understand what the business wants, or what maybe the commercial challenges look like on day-to-day basis, and we need to understand the technical capabilities that we have. But I think it is always important to keep a big business focus and problem-solving focus in the way you tackle also a technical project. So, yeah, as I said, I think I'm quite busy with and coaching and guiding teams and trying to put this mindset into the way we act. But I'm also often personally involved in early stage discussions and brainstorming, supporting the initial setup of a new data product or a new project. And on things are clearer and the direction is a bit pathed, I will usually try to let the team run the things themselves, step up their responsibility, and let them run things independently. But yeah, where I see a lot of impact happening is these early stages, because you can go a fundamentally wrong direction if you don't pay attention to what really matters, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that gives me energy, and I really like bridging basically accuracy and impact, and make sure that the solutions that we build, let it be data pipelines, dashboards, chatbots, or agents these days, that they really solve a problem and are not just a technical solution, basically, that we have built. I've seen that way too often, that you build something because it's nice and it feels cool, and it is the latest technology that is on the market, so you try to apply that. But in the end, the stakeholder could not really use it at all, because it was not solving a problem for them. Actually, in fact, we often see the case that analytical tools are something on top of their daily work, which cost them time to use, and they do not really see the immediate impact on that. So yeah, that's why I really believe that coming from the problem angle really helps making sure that projects have a more likelihood to turn into success.
And are there any? It's a really interesting point, because it kind of brings me to my next question about what criteria you use to decide what's worth. In this squad, the AI kind of experiments. Like, what criteria you use to decide what's worth testing, or what to like pause or stop? Is it like? Does it have more to do with like data readiness, or kind of stakeholder pull, or like return on investment potential? What is it?
Yeah, I think maybe let me quickly explain what the focus areas are of that squad, and then we can talk about the use cases, because and indeed, I think you can tackle the new Gen AI capabilities from two aspects. The first one is, as I said, personal productivity and usage of everybody in our organization. And the second one is our centrally driven use cases and products that you can build. And the three pillars of our squad focus on equip the people with the right tooling they need, skill up the organization the way that allows them thinking about this new technology and applying it. But the last pillar, and perhaps that's the biggest one also from a technical perspective, is the enablement of use cases, right? And now you ask about how we pick up these use cases. And when we started with this AI squad, we followed two approaches. The first one was we mapped out all the data products and processes that we are involved in today. So what is our core responsibility as a marketing, insights, and analytics department? What kind of deliverables do we have? What are the things that the stakeholders interact with today already? And we tried to understand what are elements or process steps where we see potential that AI could help either simplify, automate, or improve. And the second angle was we ask our colleagues simply, do you have any kind of ideas? Do you see potential for use cases that could either be something we improve or it is actually something new that wasn't there before. So we collected, based on that, a lot of ideas. I think it was 30 to 35 different use cases that are in our, let's say, funnel of areas we can look into. And then we assessed them from two angles. The first one was feasibility. Like, do we feel we have the right tools and the right skill set already to also turn this into something meaningful? And do we have the right data? Do we have the right tools? Like a lot of things that can limit you in execution, right? So we tried to assess the feasibility for all these use cases. And the second dimension was on the expected impact. So is it a more nice to have use case? Is it solving a problem? Or does it really also has the potential to create, I don't know, additional opportunities or better marketing activities, whatever? And I think with these two kind of dimensions, we simply built a matrix and try to figure out what is the area that is feasible and is expecting high impact. So it sounds pretty simple and straightforward, and it really is. But that was our starting point because we had to start somewhere, honestly.
Yeah, and I believe you're running these experiments, or I don't know what you're calling them, kind of internally, but you're running them like they're kind of 4 to 8 week experiments.
Yeah.
Is that right? They're kind of these like missions, you could say.
That's the aim. We talked earlier about how slow healthcare can be, and with these long sales cycles of 2 to 3 years, you can imagine that analytics projects also tend to be more on the, let's say, longer side of scale, meaning that you build things that take months to quarters, sometimes a year. And the idea here was, if we focus on something for a quarter and really try to understand what's working, we get incredibly slow, and there's a risk that we focus on the wrong thing. So the mindset we tried to change here was, rather than building final deliverables or commit to something that will work, and then we say we need these like 3, 4, 5 months, we put a roadmap on the charter and then work on it. We tried to drop that idea and said we have to become a bit more agile and fast moving. So indeed, we call it experiments or proof of concept phases, I would say. Where we lower the risk by fast execution and speed up the feedback cycle. So our aim indeed was not 3 to 5 months projects, but 4 to 8 weeks experiments that will show us quickly if something is possible and has potential to get implemented or not. And I think the most important part is to be really honest to yourself if things don't work, because quite often, and honestly, I see that at myself also, you build something, it is nice, you get a sense it's not really what you wanted to build, it's not really working the way it was supposed to do, and perhaps the reaction of the people you show it is a bit like, oh yeah, that's cool, let's talk about it another day, but it is not really at the stage where you hoped it would be at that moment of time. And I think it is extremely important to be honest to yourself and then also stop and kill things simply. Because you can't run 20 experiments at the same time. Our focus currently is on 3 to 5 experiments with the team setup we have. And the sooner we can kill something and conclude it doesn't work, the better, because this gives space for a new experiment and exploring something new, right?
Yeah, it's important to kill your darlings sometimes, right?
Yes, exactly.
But I mean, it's interesting because I say this, or I talk about this with a lot of guests as well, about how many organizations successfully pilot AI, but struggle to make the pilots kind of durable or kind of turn them into these long-term products, right? So these kind of short cycles that you work with, these kind of proof of concepts, are really important because they give fast clarity on the problem, or like the data and the owner early on, right? In your experience, what usually breaks when teams try to scale an AI pilot into like a real long-term product?
Yeah, it depends a bit on how you set up the proof of concept or the experiment, because you want to execute fast. Sometimes you make assumptions on data ingestion, tool connection, and you build these kind of workarounds to make it work quickly, or to mock up some front ends and bring something to really deployment and production is a different exercise, to be honest. And if you ask me how many things are fully running in production now after a couple of months running this AI squad, the answer is we're deploying 2 use cases right now, but I would not describe them as being fully in production, maintained, and mature use cases, or let's say products. So this is a different type of discipline to bring it to production. And besides the thing I just mentioned that can break on, let's say, too many assumptions, I think it's also usually the processes around it. If you have a very messy, manual, non-digitalized process, for example, and you now try to put an autonomous agent into this process, per design, this cannot really work, right? So from my perspective, the change management aspect to really also change the organization around these new products is often undervalued. And this can really be a breaking point, honestly, when you want to then leverage these new solutions and possibilities, because the organization is simply not ready for it, or the process or certain operational steps are just not ready to consume it.
And to move on to talk a little bit about data platforms and governance, and also like evolving architecture. To set the scene here a little bit for listeners, first, I've been reading a little bit about how many large enterprises are kind of shifting towards this so-called hub and spoke or data mesh kind of architecture styles. The idea in both being to kind of push data ownership closer to the domains, right? The relevant areas within the business, while a central platform keeps shared standards and security and quality in place. So correct me if I'm wrong, but in other words, it's like decentralized delivery with central guardrails, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a nice description.
Good. Now, your data platform seems to have gone through like a real journey, right? We mentioned it in the introduction, from centralized to kind of decentralized, and now into this more kind of domain-driven or governed model. What drove each of those shifts, or what broke or what became impossible at each stage?
Yeah, I think that as much as I am a big fan of, let's say, a governed platform with many different contributors, I appreciate the need. You need to start somewhere. So I think you cannot, if you don't have anything in place, I would almost argue it's nearly impossible, or at least very, very difficult to start with a data mesh setup or this hub and spoke model. There are different names for it. For me, it seems pretty much the same thing, even though some listeners might disagree now. Sorry for that, but I try to simplify. But I think if you try to start with this setup we're in now, it can be quite messy. So you need to start somewhere. And the approach that our central teams took was starting with a centralized data platform. We had a big central IT team that was making sure the infrastructure is there, building the ETL pipelines for central data sets from our main systems, like our ERP systems or CRM systems. These are all standardized systems. You can quite easily, I would say, ingest them into a centralized data platform as well. You don't need so much domain expertise for that at first instance. And therefore, I believe the centralized approach in the beginning made sense. And it was a good starting point and brought us also where we are today. But I think something maybe many people can relate to, especially when you're not working in the central team, central platforms are usually too slow, and the processes around it also. If, for example, we talked earlier about my early career days working in the local market. If I'm sitting in Hamburg and I have an idea for a project and I want to build a dashboard and I need like 2-3 data sources, and they are technically available in our data lake that was created, getting this kind of build together an effect table that I can pull into my dashboard. In the past would have taken me easily like 3 to 6 months. And before that, you need to find budget for it. There are processes you need to follow. You need to pitch it. And they prioritize their use cases as well. We just talked about use case prioritization on for the Gen AI squad. Of course, if you're the central IT team and the whole world is having ideas, you need to prioritize as well. So that makes it fairly slow, I would say, and also leads to a sense of frustration in the decentralized teams, especially. So that's why I think they started to open the access also to teams outside the central team. And us in the markets or in the functions or in the businesses, analytics teams could start using this platform now for their products as well. So we kind of decentralized it, which unlocked agility, I would say. Well, before the centralized approach ensured control. But the idea was really many teams should leverage this technology, infrastructure, and the data lake. But this is what I would describe as the most chaotic phase you can have in your organization, because while having access is a good thing, first of all. Of course, everybody builds their own, let's say, sources of truths, beliefs, data products, and you see a lot of redundancies. And we saw the same KPI or the same data set being processed into the data platform like multiple times, like double-digit times, with a little bit different definitions. And it can really be difficult to then understand what is really the source of truth if, for, let's say, a financial metric, you have over 100 different tables that you could use and all show somehow this financial metric, but in different lenses and with different, let's say, logics applied.
Different definitions, yeah.
Exactly. And I think this typical move from central to decentral is what many companies faced as or experienced as a bit of chaotic, as I was saying. And this is where this more hub and spoke model came into place, where you say, okay, we try to bring governance from a central side, and we make clear agreements on which domain or which function is owning which particular data sets and contributing them towards the data platform. So central data sets are still getting loaded into the platform from the central IT team. But for example, us in marketing, to go back to my department, we have the clear mandate that all the marketing related data sets, for example, our website visits or our NPS program, customer loyalty data sets, all these kind of things fall into our area, and we are the owner of it. So it's also our responsibility to contribute them towards the data platform, which makes us being the owner or the contributor of certain data sets. But at the same time, we are the consumer of all the other data sets from other, let's say, domains. So, and that's a bit like you give something, you can take something. And this kind of setup is where we are today, which I believe is quite a good approach. Has its downsides, but if it's governed well, it can bring a lot of advantages, I would say.
And when you talk about it in theory, it does make a lot of sense. But how do you decide which rules must be global or kind of centralized, like security or definitions or whatever it might be, versus where domains should be kind of free to move, fast and experiment?
In the end, it's a bit case by case decision. There is no such framework where we say we check these 3-4 criteria and then that's the solution. But if I keep talking about the marketing related data sets that we own, of course, it does make sense that we have an expertise team or data owners, data experts around website data, for example, and they, together with the respective data engineer, sit down and kind of define what is our belief of what is right and implement these kind of rules then. So it's always, I would say, a shared ownership between the technical team that implements it and the non-technical team that kind of owns the data. And I think pairing these two disciplines, tech and non-tech, going back to that phrase from the beginning, is quite crucial in this setup as well, because only then you can ensure that what ends up being in the tables and used by many teams around us is actually what the owners or the experts in our organization believe is the right thing. So yeah, you need to spot who is the domain owner or the data set owner, and then work closely with them to force these definitions in.
And looking forward, what's if any, is there, what's the next evolution of the platform that you're aiming for? How do you think future progress or iterations will support kind of AI use cases and marketing insights at even greater scale than today, for example?
Yeah, I think we have worked a lot on the basics and on the foundations from a traditional data management, data engineering, analytics side in the past years. Now, in the era of AI, certain things become more important. And excuse me if I throw a few buzzwords in, but for example, everything around metadata, data lineage, more governance control, I think this becomes more important. When I was in my early days and previous roles, metadata was not really a thing, to be honest. I heard about it. I actually remember it from university. There was somewhere on a slide and they said, yeah, metadata is important. And I did not even understand what metadata was, because it was not really a thing for, let's say, pragmatic analytics teams like us. But now with AI, when you want to build even a RAG model, a simple RAG model, right, that interacts with your data, it needs to understand what is in there and how do I interpret this column and what is our naming conventions. There is an interesting problem, I would say, from an agentic perspective, because one of our business units works in the domain of ultrasound machines, right? You know that, like, ultrasound devices that you can do certain scans and procedures with. And the abbreviation for this is US, ultrasound. And at the same time, we operate also in the North American market. And the abbreviation for that market for a long time was also the US, United States. So how should a machine know when you ask to, let's say, a chatbot, give me the revenue for US, if you talk about ultrasound or the United States, right? And just this understanding that this could be the same thing and how to interpret that, I think this whole modeling and knowledge, I think this is something we need to bring more clearly into the data platforms. And that's really why metadata and more connected data sets are getting more and more important, I believe. So our focus is clearly now making our data platform kind of AI ready in the next couple of months, because it's needed simply.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting point, and something I've kind of experienced firsthand as well with this kind of metadata. I was kind of working in our BI platform and our kind of data warehouse, and trying to work a little bit with conversational analytics. And you would kind of like prompt the tool and say, okay, give me the answer to this question, and it would kind of try to give you the answer from the kind of information or data it infers based on the column name, for example, because there's no metadata or descriptions. But as soon as you add that, it can give you quite a precise and accurate answer.
It's getting much more accurate. Yeah, I think. And this is also one of the learnings from our experiments that we talked about earlier, that if you try to build simple chatbots on your data sets and you don't do much with it, the results sometimes are okayish, but also quite often not so great. But small changes like adding meaningful metadata or linking data sets or pre-aggregating data sets can also help sometimes, can really make a difference. Maybe if you build a chatbot, you don't want to give the full table with like 150 columns to it and then let decide which to take out. If your regular use cases, or 80-90% of the requests that are coming in from users, always only, let's say, refer to 5 to 10 columns in that table, why do you want to give the whole table to the system? So you kind of can make an assumption and a bit of a pre-selection or pre-aggregation also, column-wise or like row-wise, to make these models working more powerful. That's also one approach we are currently exploring, how to pre-process or prepare the input data sets for these models in a more meaningful way, that the results improve a bit.
Fantastic. Really, really interesting. But let's move on to talk a little bit about hiring and talent. What makes a great data engineer? Because you've hired and you've built data engineering teams. So what qualities or signals tell you that someone will excel in modern data engineering?
Yeah, I think a lot of people might expect now that I give a list of the most fantastic tech stack or something like that. For us, and maybe that's because I'm coming more from the pragmatic, hands-on side, working with local teams a lot. But my focus is much more on curiosity, communication, and the doing mindset, really. Because I believe if somebody is working in, let's say, the data domain, data engineering domain, software engineering, agentic AI developers, whatever, they all have a sense for technical expertise and that they have technical competence, full stop. There might be some people that focus more on traditional BI systems in the past. Some people might have a bit more background in data science methods, and some coming more from a software engineering background. But they all can code, they all can understand how data pipelines work. But for me, the greatest qualities or the signals that someone might excel in a team like ours is, as I said, curiosity about the business problems and not just the tech stack. We talked a lot about the medical domain already today, right? But this, you need to keep that in mind. These like long sales cycles, how hospitals work, how they are funded. This is also different from country to country. All the health systems work differently across Europe and the world even more. So you need this curiosity and this eagerness to get into that, to really build a product and not just a solution. And the communication skills, I think, are more crucial than ever. The ability to explain complex systems clearly. And why do I say it's more needed than ever? Because I believe in this AI journey with agents and more autonomous systems, people can quickly jump into using buzzwords or describing things on high level, which sounds fancy, and you might impress people. But if you cannot really explain, let's say, the core principles or the problems in simplistic ways, it might be quite hard to get through to stakeholders properly. So therefore, I think that is extremely important. And the last part I mentioned, this kind of doing mindset, is really having a reasonable sense for governance and scalability on one hand side, but also a very pragmatic approach on doing things hands-on, like immediately. I described that actually last week in another discussion as kind of Pareto-style independence. I think the greatest talents have a good sense for what, let's say, criteria or standards should we meet, how far can I explore myself and independently, but without getting lost in rabbit holes or too many details. Like what are these 20% that I want to leave out, and don't get lost into the details now, and where do I have to ask for help sometimes? I think this differentiation between where can I go on my own and what are the, let's say, guardrails I'm moving into, versus what is the danger zone that I should stay out. I think having this kind of understanding, I would say, is one of the key, the key values or the key qualities of a good, let's say, resource and data engineering, data analytics, and AI these days.
Yeah, no, it's a really good way of putting it. And I think maybe whereas data engineers was, mostly or kind of solely about kind of pipeline skills, and in the past is much more a mix of this kind of platform mindset, stakeholder empathy as well. like you're
Yeah.
saying, but also data product kind of business thinking, right? So it's really, really well put. But like, how does, with all this in mind, how does it kind of translate into how you evaluate candidates, candidates from different backgrounds, be it kind of software or analytics or cloud, machine learning, or even
Yeah.
whatever it might be. How do you kind of evaluate candidates without maybe over-indexing on one ideal profile?
Yeah. No, I think as I tried to describe, the background on technical side doesn't matter too much. I think as long as you have expertise in a broader, let's say, category, for example, let's say cloud providers, it doesn't matter which one you worked with from the big 4 or 5, or if you have built BI solutions, it doesn't really matter if you have done this with vendor A or vendor B or vendor C, in my opinion, because it is a transferable skill set that you develop, and not so much being an expert in a particular tool. If you need to build a team from scratch and you have just, let's say, 1 or 2 spots to hire, and it's really a given that you have to stick to a certain, let's say, tech stack, it might make sense to look for people that have experience in that. So I think that is also part of the truth. But more generally spoken, if you want to like grow your team and see where you go from a, let's say, use case perspective, the technology background does not matter too much, I would say, as long as the experiences is in the same way. And also, what I would always like to stress out a bit is realism and hiring as well, especially about tools and new trends. I mean, per design, there are no, let's say, experienced senior people in generative AI solutions, because we have the technology for 2 to 3 years now in the way we have it today, right? So everybody is starting in there. And that's why and I want to go back to what I said earlier, as long as the people are curious about it and really want to get into the things and can show that they can transfer, let's say, experience they had in a certain project into a new problem area or into a new domain, I think that that's a good signal overall for a stronger fit, rather than somebody that is just really good in their technology and their project, and it's just good in it and wants to stay good in that. That's also fine. You need experts for certain areas in larger organizations as well. But when it comes to pragmatic, small, fast-paced teams like ours, I would always. I'm always just trying to understand how curious and how fascinated these people are by new things and how easily they can get into that,
And out of interest, what problems or what hiring kind of bottlenecks do you run into most often today? Is it kind of the lack of product thinking or that mindset you've been talking about, or is it difficulty finding people who can work cross-functionally, for example? What would you say is most common?
Yeah, I think if I talk about data engineers now, the most difficult part is finding somebody that has a good mixture between technical expertise like data modeling and the hard skills, and stakeholder context understanding or communication skills. So a bit what I said before. So you have either very talkative people, but they kind of lack maybe a bit more the technical execution side, or you find people that are very strong on the tech side and then a bit less strong on the interaction and stakeholder engagement. And just don't get me wrong, right? There are teams or companies that have big engineering teams, like 20 plus people, and these engineers are not talking to stakeholders every day. They follow certain, let's say, plans and do their job in a good way. And maybe there it is like less needed, but I can only talk about the perspective that I'm in our more functional or, let's say, business regional teams. And there I think the stakeholder context matters most. So the hiring bottleneck I was facing the most so far was indeed people that do not really understand maybe the business context too much, or also do not have that much interest in it, and a bit the communication gaps. I'm a nerd myself, and I know how hard it sometimes can be to get out of the tech jargon and get into, let's say, business jargon.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is quite important to be capable switching these two roles mentally from time to time. So yeah, as hard as it is, that's something I see being a problem from time to time with candidates.
Yeah, I agree. Really, really important business skill now to be able to kind of be that translator where need be. But as we wrap up here, I'd like to look forward a little bit and hear what you're most excited about right now in data engineering or AI inside large enterprises.
I think with this whole AI journey, we are at the beginning very much. I think every week you go on LinkedIn and see a new trend coming up or like a new hype coming up. I'm really excited about seeing what will stay and what really makes an impact. I think traditional data engineering and analytics is an amazing area to be in, but also this area will change. Will we build a lot of dashboards tomorrow where people can kind of go in, put their filters, analyze data, and then get their kind of, let's say, insights out of it? Or are we using the data models and the data foundations we have built in our data platforms in the past years and connecting that more to agentic systems in the future? And these systems can maybe analyze the data in a more autonomous way. I'm not saying that one will replace the other, not at all, but I think new technology will come in and the landscape will change a bit. And being in this now and being part of it to drive it and being at the forefront basically is something that excites me personally a lot. That's why I love to go to work like every day, because it's just an amazing environment with a lot of new possibilities. And I think being part of that and driving that is one of the most beautiful things you can do. So I'm really just looking forward to see what will come, what will stay, what will not stay. What of all the things we talked about today is maybe redundant in a year from now, right?
Exactly.
And what
release
really
the episode quick.
Exactly. So and this is just what excites me and what I find most fascinating, I think.
No, really well put. But what's one pitfall you'd warn other companies about as they try to scale AI and data products globally?
Yeah, I think I personally, I currently think a lot about what can go wrong in the era of AI as well. And I think the solution is not building hundreds of chatbots now just because we can, and try to push them out as products just to do something with AI. I think that the biggest pitfall is forgetting to differentiate between what really matters and make an impact versus what you can do. And that was the same 10 years ago with machine learning models, honestly, or with like dashboards or other technologies. And it's the same now with AI as well. So if we just build something because we can, but not because we should, or we solve a pain point, then you will not excel, and instead create very expensive solutions that might not be needed. And that is the risk also from, let's say, a stakeholder trust perspective, that they have the expectations we do things that helps them, and not things that are just fancy technical solutions in a way. So that's something to watch out for, and that I try to keep in mind every day as well, in our team and with the projects we are involved in. And that goes back to what I said earlier. Have the confidence to cancel projects as well as soon as possible. The moment you see they don't really go in the direction you should, or you want to end up in.
Fantastic. And last one from me, Jonas. If you could fast forward 3 years from now and look back, what's the one change or kind of hope that you have that, Philips or your team, Domain specifically, has successfully made in how it works with data or AI? Something that you would make you say, we really cracked it.
Yeah, I think having the energy to focus on building the foundations right. I think that's something I'm quite proud on, and I think that is important. Well, it's a tight balance, honestly, because you want to execute use cases and you want to build things that are meaningful to your stakeholders. We just talked about that for like 50 minutes, right? But at the same time, you need to get foundations and your data platform right. And I see quite often teams are really good on one side, like a fast execution, but maybe the data platform lacks, or the other way around. But what I'm proud on is that we, I think, found a good common ground somewhere in the middle that merges these two things: fast execution, but also getting the basics right. That's something I'm proud on, and I would do again.
Fantastic. Brilliant, Jonas. Is there anything you want to add before I wrap up here?
No, I think we the time passed by quickly. It was a good talk, and thanks for having me. As I said, I think everybody that is in this industry, it's the most fantastic place to be in, and I'm just curious how we all shape the future together, and I can't wait to see what's coming next, honestly.
Oh, amen to that. And thank you so much for joining us and for sharing, I think, such a thoughtful look into data engineering leadership, into practical AI experimentation and building resilient data platforms. I think your experience in this, with cross-functional teams and your pragmatic approach is going to be really valuable for anyone listening and trying to drive change, particularly inside a large organization like Philips. So thanks once again for joining us here, Jonas.
Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thank you for listening as well. And don't forget to subscribe to Builders for more conversations with the people shaping the future of data, AI, and technology. Until the next one, keep building, and we'll see you soon.